Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Spino Council podcast. My name is Jackson Prelli, and I'm going to be one of your hosts today alongside Alyssa. And I will pass it over to Alyssa to introduce our guest today.
All right, so today we are joined with Keesje, who is a current Senior Director in Commercial Partnership and Business Development at PointsBet. Before this opportunity, Keesje had the experience working with organizations like PepsiCo, Campbell's Company, and many others. We're excited to welcome him as a seventh guest for Season 5 here on the SPIMA Council podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to being here, Alyssa and Jackson. This is going to be fun.
Perfect. So just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about your current role at PointsBet and what was your path to get there?
Yeah, for sure. Currently, I have a hybrid role at PointsBet. It's pretty interesting. So on one side of the equator, I lead all our partnerships, which include Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, Curling Canada, to name a few of our bigger ones. And then on the other side of my role, I lead our business development, which essentially is managing our top VIP and managed accounts portfolio. So how I got there is kind of an interesting story. It really goes back to my chief commercial officer who I work for, Nick Selsky. Nick and I went to university together in Mount Allison University back in well, I won't tell you how long ago because that will age me grossly. But at one point in our journeys, we did a small startup company together called In-Gamer Sports. This was probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer at this point. And it was kind of my first foray into a startup environment. And what In-Gamer was a daily sports fantasy company where you could actually change your rosters and play game on game. So we had some experience working together from a startup standpoint. Once that didn't start up all the way, I'd say we started up 3/4 of the way on In-Gamer. We raised a round of financing. We had a concept. We proved the concept. We just didn't get the exit. So I actually had to go back to the real world, where I went back to PepsiCo and was working back at PepsiCo. And then I think it was 3 Junes ago, just as PointsBet was coming into the market, and this is before Bill C-28 was finalized and approved, I got a call from Nick saying, hey, I'm going to be leading this company. He had just led an exit of a company called Monkey Knife Fight down in the US, which was a daily sports company that he sold to Bally's. And he was tapped to lead the expansion of PointsBet from Australia and the United States into Canada. And I got a call from him in June of that year saying, hey, would you be interested in leading my brand partnerships? And that was kind of the start of it. So really the journey into this organization started probably about 10 years ago when I was doing a startup company with Nick, and it led back to here.
So when sports betting became legal in Canada, what were some of the processes of getting PointsBet up and running, and what were some of your main challenges that you faced?
I think the first process was to get approved by the regulator. And I am nowhere near equipped to talk about the journey that was involved. And that was really a lot of legal and a lot of, our compliance and regulation team led a lot of that. I think the biggest challenge from a PointsBet standpoint was that nobody had ever heard of us. So we were coming into the market in Canada with basically having no brand recognition, nor did we have a database. If you think of something like the Score that had a massive database, or Torstar that had coming into the market where they had their massive database, or the daily sports companies that had like DraftKings with their daily fantasy game. Like everybody knew who DraftKings and FanDuel were. The Score had a massive head start in terms of what they had in terms of already people that recognized who they were. Our biggest challenge, candidly, after we got our approval from the AGCO, was that nobody actually knew who we were. Not only that, we were starting with a database of 0. So we essentially started from scratch, which has been a ton of fun, but at the same time, a huge lift. So that was probably, I would say, the biggest challenge we had coming in, was just that candidly, nobody knew who we were.
No, for sure. And then what were some of those strategies that you've had to use to make sure people are starting to get to know you in terms of a brand partnership aspect?
Yeah, I think the first bit was there was an approach to define ourselves as the Canadian sports book. Excuse me. And that's where it kind of led to us signing our first partnership deal with Curling Canada. So there's nothing more Canadian than curling. There was an approach to say, you know what, let's define ourselves as Canadians, Canada sports book. Let's go with this approach in terms of we're going to start with Curling Canada, work our way there. I think what really changed and really defined and gave our brand the real boost was when we signed our partnership deal with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And that came together really quickly, probably if the market opened in April of 2022, that deal got really put together in February and March. Like it happened really super fast. And what from our standpoint is there's no bigger brands, there's no bigger logos in Ontario sports, if not Canadian sports, than if you think of the iconic Toronto Maple Leafs logo. And for us to be able to come into the market and put our brands aside, the Leaf logo, the Raptor logo, MLSE in general, it gave our brand so much more credibility in the market. And it really showed that we were there for real. So it was one of those partnership deals that solidified our presence, but also more importantly, gave ourselves and our brand credibility in the Ontario marketplace, given that we're associated with these iconic brands. There has to be something there from a PointsBet standpoint.
No, 100%. That's pretty cool that you got the MLFC partnership in what sounded like a month or two, which is, I think, almost kind of unheard of to get.
Yeah, it came together, Jackson. It came together really fast. There was a lot of work on both sides, obviously, to hit those dates, but it was something that, yeah, I don't even think really the ink was dry on the contract when the playoffs started. So it was really like we were scrambling in early April just to be part of that, albeit brief playoff run, but to have some presence within Scotiabank when we launched in April. Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. And then as sports betting continues to take over the sport world, just because we see it everywhere, commercials, helmet sponsors. So what innovations or new ideas do you expect sports books to implement to get new consumers or keep consumers using that one?
It's a fascinating question. I think there's a couple parts to it. Like once, you mentioned how inundated the market is with advertisement, brand placements, things of that nature. I think there's going to be a little bit of a pivot in the market once the AGCO and they've come out with their advertising and their restrictions on celebrities and player endorsements. I'm sure you're across that. So that's something that's going to launch in February. So I think there's going to be candidly a pivot in the market in terms of how brands are defining themselves. So if you think of what Bet99 was doing with their partnership with Austin Matthews, and if you think of what is happening with BetMGM, with basically their whole ad and their whole market presence has been based around Connor McDavid, Wayne Gretzky, and their inability to do that anymore. It's going to be really interesting to see how these different brands pivot. So I think there's going to be an innovation in terms of the way that they're being marketed to consumers, especially when brands can't rely on that celebrity endorsement. So I think that's part of it. I think down the road, and this is far down the road, and there's a lot of different hurdles to move around. If you think about what happens in Europe and some of the other places where you could actually go to bet stations within different bars and establishments, I think that innovation is going to happen. It's going to be a long time because, being as regulated as we are, but I think that would be an interesting foray into it. So I think it's a couple of different things. I think it's really one, how brands are going to advertise and how companies are going to advertise with the lack of celebrity endorsements, be able to do it that way. I think there's going to be innovation in terms of where consumers can bet, how they can bet. So they're not just on their phones. There's going to be a different evolution as to more of a Vegas approach with different sports bet bars and things of that nature.
No, for sure. And then just another question in terms of because I actually have a kind of a passion for the sports industry or sport gambling industry. I find it very fascinating. So just in terms of these brand partnerships, do you find that maybe like Bet99 will try and undercut a deal with MLSC and try and cut you guys out? Is there any
well, it's pretty hard to do that because if you think about the different contractual terms, do you guys do contracts when you're going through your sports management programs?
A little bit. We do sport law in second year, and then there's an optional sport law class in third year, and then there's actually a contracts based course in fourth year. So a little
a Bet99 couldn't come in and basically undercut our deal. They just can't do that. We have our partnership agreement with the partners that we have. What I think it will be interesting is when these deals come up, because you're thinking of all the different big ones that are out there in the market, and you can kind of go through them, right? If you think about the Score partnership with the Toronto Blue Jays, for example, if you think about FanDuel with MLSE, us with MLSE, what will be really interesting is what happens when these renewal terms come up, and what does that do to the current value of the contracts. And obviously, you had other brands that bet on celebrity endorsements. They're going to be in the market to be looking for different forms of partnership deals. So I think if I'm sitting there from an MLSE standpoint or an Ottawa Sports Entertainment standpoint, I'm actually kind of really excited when my renewals are coming up, because I think that there's going to be more players looking to sign those deals, which is only going to drive the value of those contracts up.
All right, so now we just have a couple sports questions. So how did you
Sure.
find your calling to work in the sports industry?
I was an athlete, like I played junior hockey growing up. I played at the university level. I played sports in the off season. I played competitive ball all the way through the kids. My dad was a good athlete. My dad actually rode for Team Canada in the World Championships. He won a Bandy Cup playing football. My brother played sports. My brother he played rugby at university level. He played junior hockey as well. So I think for me, I love sports. And I think that was part of it. And I was always kind of eyeing an ability to work in the sports industry in some capacity. I wasn't good enough a player to become pro. I wasn't in that coaching world or where I could go in and play or work from a team in that capacity. So when I had the opportunity to work in the sports industry via this avenue, it was super exciting for me. And I think that's one of the elements where it doesn't feel like work sometimes, because I love sports that much that when I get in and I'm doing different things at games, or entertaining VIPs, or working with like the senior team over at MLSE to divide concepts, it literally doesn't feel like work because I just love sports that much.
No, perfect. And that's what a lot of profs try to tell us is if you can find something that doesn't feel like work, then you're gonna love it because you're gonna enjoy going to it. So
That's the best message though, because like once you marry up your passion with what you're doing from an employment standpoint, it really you're going to be better at whatever it is you do, whether it's sports, being whatever it is, accountant, lawyer, doctor, teacher. You have to have that passion for what you're doing. But I think from a sports standpoint, there is this, it does become work at times. I think there's that one element of like, yeah, I feel like I want to go to a lot of games and that's why I want to work there. But there's an element of like, you still have a day job. So that's the part that I don't think people recognize getting into. Like it gets become really hard on your family life at times. It's really late nights. You're starting the next day. Like if you had somebody from MLSC, take Chase Knights that came in to sit at our roundtable that we did. He'd be the first one to tell you that it becomes a little bit taxing at times. Like just because you're at a Leaf game doesn't mean that your work that starts at 8:30 or 9 the next day doesn't go away. So you really have to understand that there's two sides to the equation on this in this realm.
no, 100%. I don't think people realize sometimes how late night, early morning it can be in the sport industry. It's fast turnover sometimes. So
It is. It's hard. It's hard work because even though you're at a game and you're in that environment, you're still working. And all those different elements that you need to come to your job, professionalism, how you interact with people, you can't act like a fan. Like there's elements within that, sorry, excuse me, that make it really kind of, it is work. Even though it doesn't feel like work, you're still working, and all those different things that are going to make successful as an employee, you have to come through. So it takes experience. It takes a little bit of hard work, and it's something that if you can differentiate between the two and understand that you're still on the clock, for lack of a better term, you're gonna be a lot more successful at it.
perfect. And then I know you briefly touched on like the MLSC partnership, the Curling Canada's partnership, so you can take this even in a non-sports lens. But what was one of your favorite partnership deals that you've been a part of during your career?
That's a good question. Favorite ones. I got the MLSC one is by far, and that's not just because it's the biggest one I've worked on, but I've had other experience. When I was at PepsiCo, I had a great relationship with Walmart that I learned a ton with, because it was so different. Like I've always built my relationships on kind of I got good people skills. You build in where you've worked it out, like just from a relationship standpoint. I've been a relationship builder. And Walmart was interesting because Walmart wasn't like that. Walmart was very much a dollar and cents relationship build. And that was one of the first times I ever built a partnership from an analytics standpoint, where it was like basically, yeah, whether I was a good dude or not, it didn't really make much of a difference unless the bottom line wasn't working out in terms of where it needed to be. And I think that experience really set me up well with MLSC, because MLSC is kind of a little bit of both. Like there's a lot of big dollars involved. You have to drive the value out of your deal. To have more of an analytical approach to MLSC is really important. While at the same time, they're great people there, and the relationships that they build there are very strong. They've got great character people. So to be able to measure up, hey, a strong analytical approach with the same relationship building strength that made me successful has made this one really fun. And then some of it's not a bad perk to be able to go and watch, the Canucks on Saturday night play the Leafs and see what a great game it was in Scotiabank. It was a ton of fun. And we entertained some great clients that night. So we had kind of like, wow, like this is a great game, but we also had some really important VIPs that we were taking care of that night. So to be able to measure up and marry up the two things has made this partnership deal super fun.
This question's not on here, but I just have a question. What did you think about the Shane Pinto situation?
The Shane Pinto situation is really interesting. I didn't really necessarily like his comments about the, hey, I've got a sports betting logo on my helmet. I mean, those guys are so well educated in terms of what they can do and what they can't do that it kind of felt like it was a scapegoating the industry versus, what is the revenue that was been driving into the to the Ottawa Senators' bottom line. I kind of felt like he took the easy way out by blaming the sports betting industry and using that whole like, well, wait a second, how wrong is this that I'm getting this penalty versus, I've got the logo on my helmet. The other part to it that I know, and I've never been privy to it, but I know what happens is that any athlete is so subjective to so much information from both the league and the player association that there really is no gray area on that. It's part of their onboarding when they come and start the season. Like to claim that they didn't know or was unaware of what was happening, it's a little bit of a false narrative because it's very clear in terms of what they can and what they can't do. So it's a situation where I thought it was a kind of a lot of like scapegoating where it didn't really belong. But it also kind of made me go back to why current players were allowed to endorse sportsbook to begin with. I've always felt like that was a little bit weird, and it was always creating kind of an area that didn't need to be had. Like the AGCO's decision to ban current athletes, I think was absolutely the right one. I don't necessarily think that they should have ever been allowed to be associated with sports betting companies. I look at my own son, who's 10. He idolizes Willie Nylander and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And I look at it and go like, the fact that 2 of the 3 of those guys are fronting different sports books. I never liked that from the start. I didn't think it was necessary. And I didn't think that it would really do any benefits for the books. So I kind of think it's all wrapped in together in one. But to answer your question, to go back, I think that there was plenty of information provided to the players in across the leagues that it should really never have come to the fact of him betting on it, nor like if you think of the stories down in the US where you've got a lot of different football players that have been caught. There's no excuse. They know that there is going to be consequences. They know that it's tracked. The companies can easily find out what's happening. The regulators can find out, obviously in the case of Pinto, that was found out. So I really get into, there's no black and white in this one. Like it's a pretty straightforward, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And to turn around and say, well, there's a logo on my helmet. How this is unfair kind of situation doesn't really hold water for me.
No, for sure. And I think like you talk about like down in the States with the NFL, like because I'm a Lions fan, so I got to see the whole suspension with Jameson Williams, and like I kind of find it a little interesting how the one post it was like, oh, Jameson Williams suspended 6 games, and then the next post from the Lions was one that was sponsored from a sports book. I think it was MGM Grand. So I
Yeah.
was kind of like, we gotta like find some sort of like middle ground here because like as like you said, I don't believe that's like you look at some of these Leafs players, they're sponsoring all these sports books, and then how is this going to affect the youth? Like for somebody like your son that's 10. So I think it's definitely an area that needs to be explored a little bit more, but the players definitely know what they can't do and what they can't do.
They absolutely know what they can do and what they can't do. Like that would be crystal clear in terms of the communication and what's going out. But I think the deeper part of this is like if you think of the different advertisement methods, I 100% agree with the AGCO in removing current athletes. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that it's going to influence somebody of a certain age that you want to be participating in your book. Like my days, I've met a lot of athletes. They're great. I totally respect what they've done to be professionals in their sports. Do them saying they're going to buy one thing or like sponsoring one thing influence my decision making process in a bit? No, not at all. Like, okay, great. I see Mitch Marner's front facing Sports Interaction. It's not going to make me go and join Sports Interaction because Mitch Marner's on an ad. And I think once you cross a certain age threshold, those days of being influenced in terms of the celebrity pushing you into one area or the other is going to be less and less influential. So why have that even as out there? So I'm glad that they've removed current athletes.
Okay, and just to move on to our very last question, I imagine that you're not allowed to bet on sports while working for PointsBet, but if you could, what sport would you bet on and why?
We are actually allowed to bet on other books. So we
Okay.
can't bet, you can't bet on your own book, but you can bet on others. I personally don't. I've actually, it's funny, I work in this industry. I don't think I've ever placed a sports bet. And it's something that I just is not interesting to me in terms of that area. But if I were to bet, I think I would probably get into different player props. I think would be a lot more fun. I like some of the goofy parlays that you see that hit. It's just interesting for me to see people that are putting together these 5 or 6 different things that have really let no chance of hitting, and then you see when they do, it's like, wow, like how did that person put together that 6 or 7 leg parlay that included 3 wacky anytime touchdowns or anytime goal scorers? Like I think I would get more into those parlay bets and those kind of fun, different combinations. I love watching football, so I think I probably, if I was a better, I would probably bet heavy on the NFL. But I don't have that. So, but to answer your question, if I were, it would probably be more like parlays on football.
No, for sure. And seeing those long leg parlays, I always like to see them and hope that they hit for people because it's definitely interesting. But I definitely understand what you mean. I've always joked that I want to work for a sports book company so I could get my money back that I've lost in terms of sports betting.
Well,
So
you could earn it back in forms of like a biweekly paycheck.
no, exactly. Trying to earn it back that way. So
Exactly.
Keisha, we've had a great conversation, and as we always like to do on the Stream of Council podcast, we always like to give the floor to our guests to say whatever they would like, ask questions to myself or Alyssa. But just before we end it off here, we would like to give the floor to you.
Yeah, like what do you like most about your program? Like, how did you end up at Brock, Jackson? Unless I'm curious.
For me, it was just more so knowing I wanted to work in sport. And just I felt like this was the best program in Canada, just because it is one of the only programs where it's not associated with human kinetics. And as somebody who hates bio as much as I do, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be the good one. I was able to see like the course outline, like this could be like sport marketing year 2 could be cool, sport finance in year 2 could be cool. So
Yeah.
I just like seeing like the courses that were available and just overall just knowing like obviously seeing the big time alumni that have coming out of this program, like seeing Kyle Dubas's name, even though I'm not a Leafs fan, definitely was like, okay, like they have big alumni to come out of that program. So I think just that was mostly one of the reasons why I came to Brock. And then what I like about the program is just how diverse you can take it. Everyone can take the sport management program their own way. Like Alyssa, I'm kind of gonna speak for her for a little bit, but she's gonna go. I'm assuming gonna go into social media kind of route. My roommate's going to law school from sport management. I want to go into event management. So you have the ability to take it any which
Right.
way you'd like, and that's kind of why I like it. But I'll pass over to Alyssa.
Yeah, so I'm actually a first year, so I just started. So I was really looking into this program. I actually work in junior high hockey, so I kind of knew that I like sports for that.
Yeah.
And I was kind of tossing between this program and the program over at TMU and sports media. But I personally don't want to be like a reporter. I feel like, as you said, like I would never be professional. I would freak out if I was interviewing someone because I would just be a
Yeah.
total fangirl. So I kind of want to still be in the action, but behind the scenes a little bit. So I did choose this program. And it's been really good so far. Like I really enjoy it. I still have the opportunity to go back and work for that same junior team in my hometown, and
Which
it's
junior
opened
team
up
is
a
it?
lot of doors. What, sorry?
What junior team is it?
They're called the Milton Menace. They're in the
Ah,
OJHL.
nice. Yeah, I would say this, it's smart when you have an awareness as to what you like and what you don't like. The one thing I would leave people with, and I think it's a message that Hannah Gogan delivered when we did the roundtable at the PointsBet Invitational. If you're doing an internship, take it seriously. Like your internship is your foray into building experience, but more importantly, it's your ability to build a network within a different company that you probably want to work with at some point. So I remember even at PepsiCo more so, like you would have interns that came in that had a voice that you remembered who they were, and more times than not, they would end up working and starting their careers and coming out of school, having a job while they were still in school. Like think of the comfort level of being in your last year and already knowing that you've lined up a job that once you start on your own terms that you have that waiting for you. I think the internship is the perfect avenue to do that, where you can come in, build a reputation, deliver like good results, and more times than not, it can lead to a job while you're still in school. And I think that's the route that I would really like stress home to people within your program, is that internship is extremely important.
No, perfect. And that's something that definitely our profs preach as well. Take that internship seriously. So,
Networking.
Well, not only that, but just have a voice. Like, don't go in meek. Like, people don't like people sit in the corner that don't say anything. And I think it's more along those lines, is like, there's a lot of people that are always looking for different opinions, what is happening from a younger perspective. And you bring that. And to sit there, and I've seen interns that have said nothing. I've seen interns that have been very vocal, and the ones that have always been the most successful are the ones that are vocal, but they do it in a way that is leveraging insights from the perspective that they have. And I think that's an important message, just to have conviction, to speak when you have something to say, but to really to leverage those internships as a way to drive a reputation and make a mark within an organization that will lead ultimately to what you want. If that's working in a different sports organization in that field, that's the best route to go in there.
perfect. Well, on behalf of myself, Alyssa, Stream Council podcast, and Stream Council as a whole, Keisha, we would just like to say thank you for your time, and we appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, 100%. This has been great. Thanks very much.